everyone, I'm David Babayan, host of the Gray Area podcast. Today's topic revolves around social media and more generally, technology. This is particularly well suited for the podcast, given that social media seems to be in a gray area in many people's lives. We understand the immense benefits that social media gives us, like the ease of connecting with friends, entertainment, and avenues for creativity. But at the same time, it feels like many people who use social media are frustrated with how addicting the apps are and feel as if they have a stranglehold on their time. Given that these apps are likely not going away anytime soon, I think it's best that we find ways of mitigating their negative effects. And someone who has a very interesting story in that regard is our guest, a third-year student, Meysoon Quraishi.
Hi, everyone.
So I remember in mid-October, you wrote a blog that really caught my eye. It was titled, I Think I Might Be Addicted to My Phone.
Yes.
I think that's a situation a lot of us are in. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it kind of just started like I had spent the night at my boyfriend's and I just left my AirPods there, my AirPod Pros. And I like started the day and I realized like immediately that they weren't in my pocket. I was like, something's missing. And I spent like the subsequent 5 to 6 hours without them. And I just realized that I totally experienced the world differently because I wasn't constantly going on my phone with one AirPod in, looking at TikToks like while I was on the elevator or waiting for my lunch or whatever it was. Like I wasn't, having both the AirPods in, walking to class, scrolling on TikTok or just listening to music. And I kind of felt like a sense of anxiety without my AirPods. And that's when I realized, oh my God, I have a real problem. I'm addicted to my phone. And then I realized that without even like your consent on your phone, they like tell you your screen time.
Yeah.
And I went to go look at my screen time and I'm like, it was really high.
Right.
Yeah, I was like averaging like 7 to 8 hours a day on my phone. And I kind of went home to my roommate, Anna, and I was like, I'm totally addicted to my phone. And she was a little bit worse than me. She was like 12 to 13 hours on her phone.
Yeah.
And we both then like started this journey of just leaving our phones. For her, she would leave her phone at home. She would just leave it in the dorm room and then go and do work and kind of realize how much work she was getting done when you aren't constantly looking back down at your phone. And then for me, I would like zip it away or just be so conscious of like every single time I even touched my phone to pick it up. And I've been on that journey ever since. I've deleted TikTok. I never really had an unhealthy relationship with Instagram, but I've definitely reduced my use in Instagram. I'm more cognitive of when I just even go on YouTube to like press on like a video. I'm like, why am I watching this? Am I trying to avoid something? Am I procrastinating? Am I uncomfortable with sitting with a feeling? And since then, I mean, it's been how many months now, and my life has just improved astronomically.
Absolutely. And I think that's the end goal that many people want to get to. Is we know that we're not going to get to a place where we're not using these apps at all.
Yeah.
It's more so about being intentional with how we use it.
Exactly.
And yeah, my journey is kind of similar to yours, although it didn't have like one catalyst to start it. I just remember doing a project in my freshman year about social media addiction and how these companies kind of make sure that they have a stranglehold on your attention. And I started to learn about like the subtle ways that they would do so. And one great source in this regard was Cal Newport. Have you ever heard of him?
Yes.
So Cal Newport, for those who don't know, he wrote a great book called Deep Work. And the book posits that deep work is going to become more influential and is increasingly rare. And he defines deep work as the ability to do meaningful and cognitively challenging work for long periods of time. So kind of like sitting at your computer and working for like an hour and 30 minutes, 2 hours. Those things are very difficult to replicate, but they're also becoming more and more valuable in the age of AI. And he would say things that would get in the way of deep work would be, constantly checking your phone, constantly switching from task to task, and he's never had a social media account in his life.
Oh wow, he doesn't even know how bad it can
get.
He doesn't even know.
Have firsthand experience, but he also doesn't need it, right? Yeah. Like he just understands the benefits of it. I think one of the reasons he says he doesn't have one is because he works as a computer science professor at Georgetown.
Yeah.
And so he's just like constantly solving theorems and stuff like that. So he's like, if I break my attention for too long, just so negatively affects his job. And so I learned so much from him, and then I began the habit of slowly winding down my social media habits, becoming more conscious of how long I was on them and how it was affecting my productivity. So how about you? How do you think that social media and technology can affect someone's productivity, and how has it affected yours?
Oh my gosh, just when I would be doing my homework,
Yeah.
I would come like by something that was like relatively difficult or not like a task that I could double task with. So like a huge part, and I started this in high school when I had like just free access to my phone all the time. I would go and I would start doing like my math homework, and it was nothing more than like Calc 1 or Calc 2. So I would put on a TV show while I was doing it.
Yeah.
And then it kind of developed into this thing when COVID started and everything was online school, and you
Right.
did not have to learn. Like there was no need for it because
Yeah.
the classes were so easy.
Yeah.
And that's when I really got into this deep habit of just like multitasking, phone in the corner of my computer screen.
Yeah.
And then if it was a task that was any deeper than that, I didn't really want to do it. Then as we transitioned out of COVID and we started having to like actually pay attention in lectures, because you're in a lecture hall and you're not in Zoom.
You actually have to pay attention.
Yeah, like the amount of
It's
times
a
I would just like
novel idea.
stay in bed on Zoom, and I'd be
Yeah.
like, it would be like Chem 113 on Zoom, you know what I
Right.
mean? And I'd be like, I can stay in bed and like answer the top hat questions and, you know, do all these things really passively, having to
Absolutely.
learn how to actively learn again.
Yeah.
My phone didn't have a place in active learning.
For sure.
And now that I'm going to enter like the field, or I've kind of already entered like the academia field,
Yeah.
which is work that is cognitively really, really intense.
Right.
And you can't break that train of thought because you won't be able to get back to it. And
Yeah.
even then, like if I go on my phone and I look on TikTok, and then I go back to my work, I've lost my train of thought.
For sure.
And I've also like kind of given myself a task that's already really rewarding, which is scrolling on TikTok or like
Yeah.
seeing that my video blowed up or something like that.
Yeah.
And none of this stuff is actually very tangible, unlike the work that I do. I
Right.
mean, in a lab or something that's more meaningful to me and the world at large.
Yeah.
Not just scrolling all the time. So that's kind of how it fits into my life. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I think that's exactly one of the things that Cal Newport talks about is the fact that there's this thing called attention residue. Switching from one task to another
Yes.
isn't this perfect process, because as you switch from task A to task B, somewhere in the back of your mind, task A is still there, even when you
Exactly.
switch. So you're never going to be able to fully concentrate on any of the tasks if you keep dividing them up.
Exactly.
Here's another topic that I think is really interesting. Cal Newport constantly brings up this idea of solitude, and it goes back to what you were talking about. He doesn't define solitude with just being physically alone, like I think a lot of people would define it.
Yes.
He defines it as having your brain be free from the input of other people.
Yes.
And social media is constantly, flooding information into your brain, whether it's pictures, videos, or whatever it may be, and they constantly find better and better ways to do it. So I think solitude is becoming more and more rare.
Yes.
We don't ever just, sit with only our thoughts, and the ability to do that is so important. I mean, you brought up
Yeah.
earlier, like sometimes we'll use social media to get away from a feeling or whatever it may
Exactly,
be,
yeah.
instead of just sitting with it. Have you found that to be a common thing?
That, I mean, for me, that was like the main thing, was I was not able to, I found myself not kind of making and creating my own thoughts. Like I was really influenced by what I was like reading online and seeing online. And a lot of the stuff that's marketed towards women is like plastic surgery, how you should dress, how you should look. And I was even realizing when I was like looking around, I was like, oh my God, everyone now dresses the same, which is always like, there's always going to be trends and things, but like people are really keeping up with micro trends. I went to the Moving On Festival and I was like, this looks like the TikTok page just like came to life. Like it really has such a strong influence on women and like the way that they view themselves and their body image and all this stuff. So that's where I was seeing my own individual thoughts and like style kind of being influenced just by going and scrolling all of the time. And on top of that, like my own opinions on some things with politics, honestly, like that I was just seeing like, oh, that's the right way to think. And that's how this person thinks. So that's how I'm going to think now, instead of actually putting in the work and creating my own opinions on different things. I think something interesting on that road of like kind of just constantly having like this input of information that you're, another point is like you're not choosing what you're watching. It's like for a lot of times it's like a For You page that you are either scrolling through, or it's like the YouTube recommended that's already curated for you. You're not actually going into a search bar being like, oh, I want to know more about this. You know what I mean? So you kind of lack that choice and to an extent a freedom of thought. I know that on the other end of it, a lot of men that I know in my life who use social media find themselves, going into parts of the internet that are very dark in terms of like alt-right propaganda, having like very harmful thoughts about women, and that bleeds into their real life, even though it's something that's so chronically online.
Right. And that's a feature and not a bug of social
Yeah.
media, it seems like. The
Yeah.
ability to keep your attention is the most
Exactly.
valuable thing for them.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people would benefit from understanding the social media companies' models,
Mm-hmm.
their business models, a little bit better, because their whole thing revolves around, we'll give you this app for free, but we will take your data and sell it to companies that can then
Yes.
advertise on these apps. And then you eventually go, and like you said earlier with the Move On
Yeah.
event, everyone will like buy those same exact
Yes.
things, and then they'll dress the same, look the same,
Yeah.
all of that stuff, and it just feeds into this culture of consumerism, and then back to social media, figure out new trends, and go
Exactly,
just
yeah.
do the same exact thing. And then another area that I think is so interesting with solitude, like we were talking about, is the fact that it feels like with social media and the constant use of it, we can never exactly get a break from the craziness of, the outside world, right?
Yeah.
It's like there isn't any moment to just, sit silently and then just like think and reflect on other things.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I would scroll on my For You page and I would see like crisis after crisis, and then like
Yeah.
a funny TikTok, and then, someone's story about their assault, and it was so much overload all the time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure out why I was so stressed all the time and anxious, because I was like, my life is going well.
Right.
And it was just because like the human brain is not made to know about
Yeah.
500 people's different life experiences all within the span of like 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like so overwhelming. And then, yeah, you lose a sense of like being able to develop your own personal identity when like you're not consciously being like, oh, this is something that I like because of this, and like discovering things naturally. Rather, things are curated depending on like how they're going to get you to buy something. And that
Absolutely.
something could be you're buying into a political belief, you're buying into, a new trend of like leather pants, you're buying into, oh, this is like the jewelry people wear now, and they'll be wearing
Yeah.
different jewelry in 3 weeks, and you can also buy that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's like my own personal experience with it. And like also this idea of solitude is so powerful because when you are able to sit and meditate, or like what we do in PLA, which is like have mindfulness,
Yeah.
I mean, it's truly a gem, because you lose the ability to just be with your thoughts when you're constantly on social media.
Yeah. And then we were talking earlier about productivity. I feel like this
Yeah.
bleeds directly into that, because some of my best work comes after I've taken a break.
Yes.
And, I've had a day to just do things that I really enjoy doing by myself.
Yeah.
Like, I'll read, listen to podcasts, or walk, whatever it may be. And when I come back, I'm so much more productive. But if you're constantly going from one thing to another, and, you constantly have these dopamine hits, and you're worried about this crisis and that crisis, then it really, really hurts you when you do things that, you value the most.
Yeah. And even like things that you value the most, it could be as much as like sleeping.
Absolutely.
Or like I noticed that my enjoyment of like eating food went down immensely because I was constantly just like eating food and scrolling on TikTok. Like I wasn't
Yeah.
able to just sit down and have a meal and enjoy it, by myself. It's a lot of these things. Another thing for me was like running. I'd constantly be like running and like consuming media while I was running. And so I kind of just like lost that ability to just be able to sit down and do one task.
Yeah.
It also kind of ruined like a lot of my leisure activities. I've already mentioned running. Like something else I love to do is paint. And I would be like painting, but also like watching something in the corner of my screen.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
It's
I
like
just
you're
like
never fully in the moment.
I was never able to like fully engage with the task at hand, whether that be a leisure activity that's supposed to give my mind a break,
Right.
or just school in general.
Yeah.
And then I'd kind of view like scrolling on TikTok as a leisure activity, but it wasn't, because I was being bombarded with information and very toxic, cycles in my head. So
Right.
that was kind of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that also relates to the fact that people have lost sight of what a real relationship is between
Yes.
a group of friends within just one-on-one
Yeah.
interactions, where you see a lot of people and they have, I don't want to even call them relationships on social media, where they'll talk
Yeah.
a little bit often, like each other's pictures and comment on each other's posts, but that's very different from having an actual relationship in person, where you talk about things that are
Yeah.
much deeper than just surface level likes or comments or shares, whatever it may
Exactly.
be.
I've honestly felt that like within friend groups, a lot of the time people will join like organizations or things that are so heavily emphasize your importance of like having a social media presence, and then hanging out kind of just becomes taking pictures.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I cannot have one more photo of me
Yeah.
taken. Like that's just like not, I've never like, or like the whole idea of like curating like an Instagram sort of persona, and that becomes a full-time job.
Yeah.
And that bleeds into your friendships, and then it's like, oh, we're never talking about anything that I find important. It's just photos. It's
Right.
just taking pictures or making TikToks or things like this that lack a lot of depth. And then I think even though, you know, we're always online and we're super connected with other people, it can become really lonely in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think friendships are such an important thing for so many people. We see more and more people becoming lonely.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things when social media first came out is a lot of CEOs and even people who would use these platforms and have huge followings would say, oh, well, this is going to be great because it's going to create so much connection.
Yes.
And it has done that in some ways.
Yeah.
You know, I can see pictures of my cousins in other countries.
Exactly.
I can DM people very easily, swipe up on their stories, and it's a lot of fun. But at the same time, there's just a huge gap between that and creating real connections that take a lot of time, a lot of in-person communication, and a lot of dialogue about issues that, you know, don't usually get brought up in if all you're doing is taking pictures and you know, talking about surface level things. So I think that's a really important thing to keep our eye on as we try to intentionally use social media. So have you heard about the Facebook files that were released on the Wall Street Journal?
No, I have not.
So it was compiled by a whistleblower at Facebook who looked at all of the research that Facebook had done about how their platforms, and of course Facebook owns Instagram, so they have at least 2 or 3 huge platforms. They also own WhatsApp.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, yeah,
Yeah,
they do.
everyone
Wow.
forgets that.
A
but
monopoly.
It's very, very big.
Tackle that on the next podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Because everyone says, "Oh, I never use Facebook." They
Yeah,
must be
that's
a
what
little
I
bit
was
irrelevant.
thinking.
And it's
I
like
was
they're
like,
very much
okay.
not. They've mastered the art
No,
of knowing
meta.
what to buy and when. Yeah, exactly. So this whistleblower compiled a lot of the research that Facebook had done into how their platforms are affecting mostly teenagers, but people in general. And the things that they found were extremely, extremely concerning. The top feelings that were caused by being on Instagram for especially teens was how to create the perfect image, believing they're not attractive enough, not enough money, and not enough friends. And these are all things that teenagers are believing, which is kind of a scary thought because they don't really have, and I don't want to speak for all teenagers, but they don't have a real conception of who they are.
Exactly.
And, you know, they're constantly looking at pictures of supermodels and people who are extremely rich and portraying this version of themselves that is so difficult to actually attain.
Yeah. And I think that in the United States specifically, we lack a lot of sort of connection with our cultures. No matter where you're from or your background, there's not a huge emphasis on that. So you kind of go to social media to shape your personality and who you are. And it can be so harmful because you are looking at these images of people who are just so out of your range of even what you can achieve as a 15-year-old. You're 15 years old, you're not going to look like you're 27.
Right.
If you're not born into a rich family, you're not going to be super wealthy. I mean, even I remember growing up and being on Instagram and seeing all these things constantly and it affecting me heavily. I mean, even now I'm 21 years old and over, I guess like over the summer, like I'd be on TikTok and I would see, you know, trips of like other people or like videos of other people going on these big extravagant trips, and I was like, oh, why am I not doing that? Why can't I do that? Why don't I look like that? Why don't I have that like bikini set or whatever it is? Or why am I not achieving this aesthetic? And it's like, okay, that's not for me. I'm not a supermodel. I'm not a Pilates instructor. I'm not going to look like that. I'm not going to, I don't have all this money to spend on like a workout set or the newest Skims, you know? But when that's constantly being fed to you and you kind of develop this idea that what's important is in life is money and what you look like and you know how many friends people think you have and how popular you are perceived to be, that can be really damaging because I mean like as I get older and mature I'm like and more mature as I get wiser I just realized like okay, that's not what matters in life as I travel and actually engage with like the people around me and like actually, you know, form meaningful friendships that maybe were far and few between in middle school and high school. You realize that what's important is like friendship and family and like engaging with your culture and like if you're spiritual and all these other things that, you know, can't really be commodified and sold to you.
That's a great point.
And so, I mean, I almost think back to myself like, I think that I'm like so grateful that growing up I didn't even get my first iPhone till like 7th grade. You know what I mean? And I wasn't allowed to have it in my bedroom. Like I had to like charge it downstairs.
Yeah.
And I'm almost like scared for the kids that are now exposed to social media at the age of like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With their iPads and things, because they have access to YouTube. They can look at YouTube shorts.
Yeah. And part of the problem with that is that it's so new. We've only been giving these kids at age 2 these devices for the past 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
We don't really have substantive research about what the effects of this are going to be. And I think what you brought up earlier was such an interesting point about it matters how other people perceive you.
Yes.
Like, you know, the reality matters, but like also how you're perceived also matters to people on social media so much. And I think that comes from just the innate need for social approval.
Yes.
And I feel like social media companies have really tailored their apps to capitalize on our need for social approval. Like, you know, they obviously created the like button, which a lot of people don't know wasn't originally even part of Facebook.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. I thought it was always there. Like, when I got on, it was there. So.
Yeah. It took them a few years, I think. But it turns the apps into, from being just a source of information, you know, you get to see what your family members are doing, what other people are doing, you maybe get to read the news, to suddenly becomes like a reflection of how people view you.
Yes.
Which becomes very, very dangerous, I think, especially for younger people.
I mean, like my really good friend, my best friend actually in high school, Caitlin, growing up, she was Instagram famous at the ripe age of 16.
Yeah.
And the amount of damage that did to her, like the fact that she would like her life revolved around taking photos of herself as a 16-year-old, as a minor, posting them, and then like seeing like, can I break 500 likes? Can I break 600 likes?
Right.
And she wasn't even getting paid. It was just such a validation thing.
Right.
Where it was like, can I gain followers? Oh my God, I lost a follower. You know, it's not healthy. And when you live on your phone, like, which was essentially what she was doing at the time. Yeah. You kind of go crazy. Yeah. Like, she was ahead of the trend. She deleted her Instagram in, oh my God, 2017, 2018, no, 2018, summer 2018, because it had driven her literally mad. She was like, I can't live like this. Like, my life is revolving. My life, my self-worth, how I view myself as a person revolves around how many comments I get.
Yeah. And it's these arbitrary, you know, metrics.
Yeah.
I feel like as a society too, we don't even have a real good conception of what a like is. Yes. Like, you know, if just because you like someone's picture doesn't necessarily mean anything, but someone on the opposite end of that can take that like and read so much into it.
Yeah. Oh my God, exactly. I mean, you will see that with another aspect of like social media is like dating apps. Yeah. And that, oh my God, we could have a whole podcast on dating apps and how they are like terrorizing people's like pleasure centers and like really feeding into this whole self-approval thing. Right. Because this idea of like, you know, how much is someone reading into the fact that like you didn't swipe on them or like you haven't responded and how little that means to someone else. I mean, also in terms of like Snapchat, like people really read into like streaks. Yeah. And when did they snap me back or did they up my story or have they viewed my story? Right. And like and when I view stories,
swipe up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm
you
just
tap
tapping
through.
But
it means so much to the other person.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's so scary because each app has done one or two things that completely change the way that you use them. I think streaks are such a good example of that. It really feeds on your need for this social approval. Yes. Will they snap me back? Will they not? Yes. And then it puts especially young people who actually have streaks in the position of, oh my God, if I break this streak, you know, something's wrong with the relationship.
Oh my God, it was like
I remember when I was like 15 and I went to summer camp for like a week. I would give my friend my login and be like, hey, you need to keep my streak. Whatever you do, you need to respond to these 8 people that I'm friends with, or else I'm going to be sitting alone at the lunch table, which is
it was like the defining like feature of a friendship. I was like, we had a 500-day streak.
Yeah.
Like we did. Like,
right.
me and her.
We had the
and
3 heart emojis next to our names.
That was another thing. Like, just like the fact that like you could see like other people's best friends. Do you remember that? Yeah. And like how toxic. I'm like, I can't even think about how much time I wasted on things like social media that don't matter. Right. Like instead of learning and engaging like in school and like, you know, really caring about things that are meaningful. Like I couldn't have picked up a book. Like instead I was like, wait, we're sharing the same best friend. Like, you know what I mean? Like like all these little emojis to
it
tell
still
you things.
keeps me up at night. The
Yeah.
fact that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like
so
the
my
waste
friends,
of
I'm not their only
time.
friend. But
Yeah.
also the fact that it can never last is a little bit concerning.
Yes.
You're gonna get that dopamine hit when you've hit a new high of likes, or when that person views your story, or has a witty comment on your post.
Yeah.
But that goes away soon. It goes away maybe after like a day.
Yeah.
Even if it lasts that long. And then suddenly, you have a new level that you have to reach, and then it only becomes about reaching that new level if you put that emphasis on other people's perceptions so much.
Even growing up, it was like, how many streaks do you have? Like, I have 75 streaks, and I was like, oh my god, I only have 6 streaks. Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why don't people like me? It was crazy, and I can't even imagine what kids are going through today because they have like social media companies have had the time to figure out what people really like and how to like really get into people's brains and like keep them using their apps. And then on top of that, they have like unmonitored access to the internet at all times, which I can't even imagine what's going on. Like, if you're scrolling on TikTok, like the content you're consuming, that's like shaping your thoughts. Like I said again, or like I said before, with young boys, that's like a huge problem, because they're all falling into like this very alt-right sort of belief system that is bleeding into like every day, and how they treat women, like as like from people to their mom to their school teachers. You hear people talk about that a lot. So I mean, and then just being fed these belief systems, and then on top of that, having like your self-worth also come from the same source of social media. It's just so dangerous. It's like a landmine.
Yeah, and we talked about that earlier, about how these social media companies' business models are so reliant on getting a ton of views and keeping your attention on those platforms. So they're not incentivized to stop you from going down some dangerous rabbit holes.
Exactly.
In fact, they're very much incentivized to make sure that you stay on the app. And if you just keep viewing the same videos, maybe you're going to get bored and eventually leave the app. But if they can just ratchet up the how extreme the videos are, slowly but surely, eventually they can just keep you on the app and keep making money off.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, when you think like just like the pleasure centers in the brain and the dopamine centers in the brain, there's that sort of short-term dopamine, which is like maybe not the greatest stuff that you could be like interested in, but it's like something that looks really gross, or something that's like super hypersexual, or whatever it is that's like very intriguing at first. And that's kind of what gets you to click, and then you just keep on going and going and going, and all of a sudden you're consuming like this in like just bad content that has no value to it, versus like, I'm not gonna go on YouTube, or now I do, but before I wouldn't go on YouTube and look up like lecture about like the fine arts, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, oh, I want to watch like I don't know, what was like the thing back then?
Beast videos.
I want to watch Mr. Beast videos, or like a Team 10 thing, or like for me it was like makeup drama on YouTube, which was just like a cesspool of people who were just saying offensive things and being mean to each other, but like you're drawn into the drama, and all of a sudden I've watched 10 hours of content about like something Jeffree Star said.
Like it's so easy. Just like one controversy can just keep pulling you in, because you watch all these reaction videos too.
Oh my god.
I feel like that says a lot about our social media habits, that like just reaction videos can make so much money for people. They don't even need to generate their own content. They just rely on content that's already out there to create more.
That's so true. I like, the first thing I think of is like, if any of our viewers know Dramageddon 1, 2, and 3, and the makeup and like the beauty community on TikTok, the amount of time that took up in my life. Because I would watch reaction channels, and then I'd wait for them to release it, and then that's when I would watch podcasts, like when they were covering this. I mean, even recently, like on TikTok, I know that like a lot of the drama with like the Try Guys. Did you hear about this?
I heard,
Yes, like that was like a huge thing. And then like there was recently the drama with, I don't know, it's all these things that are just drama and drama and drama, and all of it is like this incredibly personal stuff to people that's being broadcasted online. And I'm like the person who's like wanting the content about someone's personal lives. Like, that's not right.
But it's so easily accessible, and it's so well made, I think. That's another problem. Like the fact that there's just so much time and effort that these creators put into doing it. And they know exactly how to, make us release more dopamine in our brain and just continue the system. They know exactly what tips and tricks to use. And the social media companies have also done that. They're very good at it. Not to go back to Cal Newport for the millionth time, but he makes the argument that you're not lazy to get off these apps. It's more so the social media companies that are spending billions and billions of dollars and hiring some of the smartest people in the world to keep you addicted. And you can go back into the ways that they do it. We talked earlier about the like button, how that wasn't fundamental to Facebook. But also some of the other things they do is like the red notification number. Like,
Oh.
if you see that on Instagram, it doesn't have to be red, like bright red like that.
Oh my God, I
or
didn't
outside
even...
of your messages
yeah.
or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But it's one of the most emotionally charged colors that there is. So they decide to put that on everything. Like,
that is so true.
He tells a story that the Facebook developers wanted to make it like light gray or blue to match it with the pattern of Facebook.
Yes.
And the graphic designer he stepped
Well,
in. He was like, we need to make this bright red.
Because it'll get people to... You're just now telling me this.
Yeah.
I did not know that, but that makes sense. Like, one of my first, things when I was going on my journey of using my phone less to, like, make it less interesting to use, and this was when I still had TikTok downloaded, was I made my phone black and white. Like, I went into the settings and I made it black and white. And honestly, it reduced my phone use. Like, everything was
fun
not
to use your phone when it's
in black and white. I was like, I have no interest in this. Like, most I was doing was responding to text messages on my computer, and then of course I would cave and I'd watch just TikToks in black and white and like be like kind of confused.
Yeah, same result.
But yeah, no, that's like a huge thing. I mean, you can tell when they're like, even the fact that you get notifications all the time from these apps.
Oh, and
is
they
crazy.
can be pointless notifications.
Oh my God, like with Snapchat, they now notify you when someone just puts something on their story. So I turned off Snapchat notifications. I was like, I can't, and now I just like miss things all the time.
But the fact that they can even notify you and you click on it, maybe just to view that person's story, it can start turning into, okay, well now I'm gonna watch 15 more people's stories.
I know, exactly.
Now I'm gonna scroll and watch 10 or like,
they
like
have
an hour worth of reels.
Yeah, because I was like, they have the news thing on Snapchat too.
Yeah,
and that's all like just like you're making you click, like just what are you gonna click on, what's interesting to you immediately. Yeah.
And Instagram got really good at that because they started to just make videos play automatically, kind of like Netflix does, where it'll have like, this video will start in 5 seconds, but you go on your Instagram and you go onto like the explore page, and the videos just play, which makes it so much easier to click as opposed to like thinking through, do I want to watch the video, do I not?
Didn't even
and then
know
making that conscious decision. So they're kind of making decisions for you and just like prodding you slowly into it.
I mean, that was one of my first things when I went on like this not using social media journey, is like, I want to be someone who types something into the search bar. It's a tiny thing, but I'm telling you, like, if you realize like how much content you're consuming without actually like consenting to watching that content, being like, I want to watch something about this, and then scrolling about it, you'll realize how much power other people have over you in terms of what they are choosing to show you versus what you're choosing to watch.
Yeah, it's so easy to get sucked into doing 15 things that you weren't originally planning on doing. And another way that I learned that social media companies kind of keep you hooked is through the refresh button. I didn't even think about this, but Cal Newport says that they studied casino habits. They like went to Las Vegas, figured out what exactly makes people stay in a casino. Yeah. And if you think about the refresh button kind of like a what do you call it when you like
a slot
pull
machine?
down, like a slot machine, exactly.
Yes.
He calls it a slot machine in your pocket because you pull it down, it vibrates, and then then you don't know what's coming. Yeah. So that anticipation builds for a few seconds, and then you're given the rewards. And they're so good at it that they don't give you exactly what you want first. Yeah. They'll make you scroll down a little bit and like let that dopamine build and then finally release it when you have something that they think you're going to like a lot.
That is so crazy because that is so, now I'm like thinking, I'm like, that is so true.
Yeah.
Because I keep on, because a huge part of the like lore for me with TikTok was that I would scroll and I'd be like, oh, this sucks, and then I'd get one video that was good.
Yeah.
And then I'd be on TikTok, I'd be like, oh my God, this is like, I don't want to watch any of this. Right. And then I'd get one video that was good, and that was what would bring me back, because I was like, oh, what if I'm missing on that one video that's good? Right. And it's funny now that we're talking right now, I'm like, I can't remember a single one of those videos. I can't tell you how many videos I was watching on TikTok that I bookmarked because I was like, I'm gonna come back to this. I never came back to a single one. Yeah. And all of this time I kind of was like thinking to myself, oh, TikTok, it's such like a hub for information, and I'm learning so much, and but I'm not learning anything. Like, I think that in the moment, because I'm like, oh, now I know this fun fact about blah, blah, blah. Right. Could I recall it? No, because I'm not learning it in the long term. Watching a 15-second video, even a 3-minute video, isn't doing me any good. And
because you're kind of like we talked about earlier, you're switching from task A to task B. Yes. And like the videos are the tasks.
Yes, exactly.
And it's like there's no way you're going to be able to retain that information unless you consciously think about it after
exactly.
the fact.
And then even when I was like in conversation, all my conversations were like, oh, I saw that in a TikTok. Oh, I saw that in a TikTok. Oh, I also watched that TikTok that you also saw this in, that you're not bringing this up to me. Like, that's craziness. Like, even just with my roommate, like we would be like talking and then then she'd bring something up. I'd be like, oh my God, I saw that TikTok too.
Yeah.
And she'd be like, oh my God, yeah, no, I saw that on TikTok as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, not all our conversations can revolve around TikTok and what we're seeing on TikTok, although it's fun. Like,
yeah, it is very
was
fun
getting
to have that
crazy.
connection. Like, have you seen that meme? Or
Yeah.
like, me and my roommates, we talk all the time. Like, after any NFL week, there's this page called Ghetto Gronk, and they make the
Shout
best.
out.
They make the best memes. And like on Tuesday or something, we'll be like, did you see the Ghetto Gronk memes? And then we'll all be like, oh my God, yeah, of course. Did you like this one? Did you like this one? And it just on and on. And I think what you talked about earlier was such an interesting point about going back to TikTok for just one video.
Yes.
And a lot of people have this mentality with social media in general, where it's like, okay, well, it gives me this benefit, and therefore I need to keep coming back to it. The mentality that I think is best is balancing out the pros and the cons.
Yes.
In very few other things do you, or like food, for example, you don't look at food and say, well, it gives me this one benefit. Like, you know, sugar can be good for you in small doses, but you don't say, oh, okay, well, because sugar has one benefit, I'm just going to keep going back.
Yeah,
to it.
exactly.
Social media is kind of the same thing, where of course it's going to give you some benefits, but it's all about balancing that out with the negatives of, you know, the time that it takes, the attention that it takes, the dopamine that it's releasing for very minimal effort.
Oh, exactly. Because it even makes, like, what you talked about with dopamine being released, it makes it harder for dopamine to be released with, like, the long-term sort of goals that you're, like, reaching towards, where things like doing my homework are no longer enjoyable.
Yeah.
You know, everyday tasks that, like, you know, what, like, even painting became not that enjoyable to me because I was like, you know, it would give me more, you know, of that rush would be scrolling on TikTok.
And the fact that TikTok takes no effort. You don't need to sit there and paint.
Yes,
you don't
exactly.
need to sit there and think. It's more so just like instant dopamine for very little work. And that's a very, very dangerous road to go down.
Yes.
So now that we've talked about so many of the dangers of social media and addiction in general, kind of want to talk about how people can start mitigating the negative effects.
Yes.
One of the things that I've done is I've deleted Instagram, which I find the most addictive, off of my phone. And I only, like, when I do want to use it, I go on Google Chrome.
Yeah.
Which, kind of like we talked about with like the black and white version of a phone, Google Chrome is that annoying to use that whenever I'm on Instagram, it's like, I don't even want to use this thing anymore.
Yeah.
So what have you done to kind of mitigate some of the effects?
I mean, honestly, like, the biggest thing for me was I didn't see that there was, like, a healthy way to use, like, the app TikTok, so I just deleted it. I was like, there's no sort of, like, I'm only gonna have 5 minutes of it, because I think that the way that the app is structured is unhealthy in itself. A lot of people, I don't personally do this, but I know that a lot of people, they have app limits, so it'll be like, oh, you hit your
like
5 minute.
Yeah,
exactly. And I'll be like, do you want to continue your limit? I think that's really healthy, like, if that's good for you, because it kind of makes you stop and think about what you're doing. A huge part of the danger of social media is you don't think when you pick up your phone. You just instinctively do it. The biggest thing for me was I don't really use Snapchat anymore, and that's because I just turn off my notifications. So I don't even see when I have a Snapchat. I'll probably go on Snapchat like once every like 3 days. I know that the other day I have gotten into now like watching more YouTube videos, but I'm so cognitive of the content that I'm watching. I will say, now that I've used my phone less, I have like fallen back into like unhealthy reading habits. Like I just finished like the Hunger Games in like 3 days because I was like that's my new dopamine hit, but at least that's something that I'm doing that's active. Like I'm actively reading. And the best part is I'm like actively creating my own thoughts and opinions about things that are happening in like a Hunger Games book. But nonetheless, like I'm like using my brain. I think that an important thing to remember is that like your brain, like any other thing in the body, is a muscle. And if you don't use it, it will go away and it will become wasted. I felt that after we came out of the pandemic, like my brain had like literally like shrunk. Like because I was never using it, and now I'm finally back up at full capacity. It took me like an entire year to get there. But yeah, I mean, that's the big thing for me overall with like your original question was turn off my notifications. When I do go on Instagram, like it's like normally to put something in my story, or like if my, you know, friend DMs me something funny, I'm never like scrolling endlessly on their, they don't have a For You page, Explore page, right? And so that's the big thing for me. And then when I am on YouTube, like I'm not just like scrolling through recommended, like I'm really choosing what I want to watch.
It's great that you're so conscious. I think another struggle that people have is the fear that their friends are going to like hate them or something if they get off social media. You know, it's like, what if I don't like their pictures and comment on them? Will they think that I don't like them or something like that? I think realistically, like when you get to a certain age, maybe that's college, people don't really care if you like their photo. I've never thought in the back of my mind like, oh, well, this person didn't like my photo.
Yeah, no, even if you have friends that really value social media that much where you think that deleting it is going to affect your friendship, you sort of have to sit there and reevaluate, are these the people I want to be friends with? Are these the people I want to surround myself with? Or do I want people who also value, deeper, more meaningful relationships?
Right. And I think it's just so important to kind of get off the platforms and start building these relationships in person or with a call or a FaceTime or something like that. So you can make sure that these are relationships that are really adding to your life and that they're built on things like, shared values, commitment to the same goals, whatever it may be, and that they're there for you in very important situations in your life. Those things are infinitely more valuable than whether or not they like your photo
than a like or what they commented or how many comments you got or things like this. I mean, even another thing just to quickly bring up is the idea that like no one really calls anymore and no one like everyone always resorts to texting or things like this. And I think that's, or like, you'll stay in contact because you have a streak still, or like you'll still Snapchat you. And I think that it is important to emphasize the fact that, we can have like face-to-face conversations still, and we can still call someone and it be normal. I know that like me and my roommate are sort of working towards like having our iPhones just become like iPods, like iPod touches basically, and then getting like a phone where like, okay, if you want to contact me, you can text me if you need to, or just call me. And sort of like getting rid of that, like that sort of like barrier of like awkwardness and just like having more authentic relationships in that way.
And there's so much less anxiety when you use it in an iPod touch way as opposed to like where you don't constantly have text and stuff like that. And speaking of the iPod, when Steve Jobs came out with the iPhone in like 2007, he didn't envision it in the way that like the iPhone is viewed today, where it's like, we're constantly using it in any moment of solitude that we have, we just pull it out and like, we're in line at Starbucks or whatever it may be, we pull it out and just use it like that, or if we're in an awkward situation, whatever it may be. He envisioned it as kind of like a way that adds to your life. You listen to music, you call people and you text and you stay in communication that way. But to like keep going back in it, that's just different than the fundamental goal of iPhones. And I think that's just a goal that we can aspire to as we go out and try to be more intentional in our social media habits.
I mean, you're your own person. Like, you can define your own relationship with your phone. Don't have big tech companies define it for you.
Right. They have their own best interests at heart.
Exactly.
Your own. So I think this was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. I hope.
Yes, I learned a lot too.
I hope you enjoyed your time on the Gray Area podcast. This was so much fun, and thank you to everyone involved.
Yes.
Come back for the next episode.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Whoever's watching.